No, I don't get to sit at these things. I give you guys the chairs of honor.
Fair enough.
Welcome to Bucks Island Fish Fest again, folks. This is our headline seminar of the day, Q&A panel, the pro panel. Let me introduce you to our panelists. This is Asheville, Alabama's Matt Herron. He is an FLW champion. He is a TTBC champion. He is well over $1 million in career earnings over his career right here. Asheville, Alabama, Bucks Island Pro, Skeeter Yamaha Pro, Matt Herron. Scott Canterbury, he is the 2019 Bassmaster Angler of the Year. He's an FLW Tour champion. Also well over $1 million. Scott Canterbury from right here in Springville, Alabama, another Bucks Island Pro. Longtime friend to all of these guys, but Dollar Bill Lowen, that's what he's gone by. He's a Bassmaster Elite Series champion from Indiana, with Brookville, Indiana. That's where he's from. I got Wes Logan, a Bassmaster Elite champion from Springville, Alabama as well. He's been on the tour several years. He's actually in the points to make the Classic this year. Wes is from Springville. He's another one of our Bucks Island Pro, Skeeter Yamaha Pro. Mark Menendez, a longtime friend of Bucks Island, longtime friend of all of ours. He is a four-time Bassmaster winner, three-time Bassmaster winner, Bassmaster Classic qualifier from Paducah, Kentucky. Been around a long time, one of the most accomplished pros, promotional pros in the business. John Garrett, who is a former Bassmaster College champion. He is now, as of April of this year, is a Bassmaster Elite Series champion. He won the Harris Chain event this year. He's been trying for the last several years to qualify for the Bassmaster Elite Series. He is a blown motor and a broken trolling motor from 2 separate years, but he made it this year. We've all been saying it's going to come, and he's here. And then, of course, we got John Cruz. He's a 2-time Bassmaster Elite Series champion, multiple-time Bassmaster Classic qualifier. He's from Salem, Virginia. He is the owner of Missile Baits, also one of the most accomplished businessmen in this business. That's our panel. You guys feel free to ask as many questions as you want. These guys represent tens of millions of dollars in career earnings across all the pro tours, let alone what they do at home. Now they won't let them fish at home anymore. So, of course, it's a lose-lose proposition when you fish at home, isn't it? For you. All right. Who wants to open everything up? Who's got a question? Let's talk, pick a topic, Mark.
Well, we can't talk about Smith Lake.
No, we can't talk about Smith Lake.
We can't talk about Smith Lake, and I don't think many of us really want to talk about it anyway. Oh, yeah. Okay.
How to target clearwater spotted bass, right?
Yes. In the middle of, yeah. I don't know, Dan. You know, the current topics, it seems like, are forward-facing, which is an ugly word for all of us. We enjoyed last week because most of us got to go bass fishing instead of using our units. You know, maybe some shallow water tactics, summertime shallow water tactics right now, because you can do that here on the Coosa River.
Okay, and most of you guys tend to fish the Coosa River. I know that's a Gunnersville freak right there, Tom Mott. He's one of our, hey guys, if you didn't know, we do that weekly fishing report here at Bucks Island. Tom's one of the stars of it. He's our Gunnersville source. So if you guys want to talk Gunnersville fishing at the end of this, feel free to talk to Tom, and his girlfriend there, St. Jennifer. She's one of the sweetest ladies around. Unless you talk to Tom. Hey, I have a saying, every woman's an angel until you talk to their husband. So, Tom will tell you that she's wonderful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, Matt, you're a shallow water, flipping is your main deal. How did you get started? What made you become a flipper?
Just mainly fishing the Coosa River. Every one of these lakes, at the time, you know, it was a new technique. Really, I caught on to it when D. Thomas and all them out of California really made it famous. And I just kind of grasped the technique and applied it to the Coosa River, and it's traveled with me all over the country. I mean, it's just something that a lot of largemouth bass, spotted bass, even smallmouth, they love to get up against cover and get in shaded areas. And it's a technique that allows you to present a multitude of baits. Flipping, everybody thinks, you know, one particular bait, but you can flip about anything you want to. But flipping and pitching is nothing but presenting a bait in a subtle presentation in this hard to reach areas to invoke a reaction bite. And that's, you know, it entails, you know, to me the biggest thing to be successful with it is boat control. I think the guys that are really, really good with it are really stealthy with their boat, and it enables them to get up close to the fish, and then being deadly accurate with a cast, almost like a bow hunter. But it's, you know, I love, when I hunt, I love to bow hunt. When I fish, I love to flip. So I just like the real close quarters, hand-to-hand combat.
Scott, you're a shallow water expert too, and flipping is one of your passion. But what second kind of thing as a shallow water angler, what's your next go-to?
Yeah, I mean, same as Matt, you know, just fishing here on the coast. But I'm a big flipper, like he said, but probably like summertime patterns, the second best thing that I would do is cover water with a top water bait. Shade plays a big deal in the summertime, just like, I mean, I fished up here Thursday, and I mean, it felt like my shirt was burning my skin. It was so hot. But if you just got in the shade just a little bit, it was 15 degrees cooler. So the fish feel the same thing. So top water is really good in the summertime. A lot of times fish are aggressive. We got a hot, you know, they're hot. They're feeding pretty well if you can get in the shade or something. So a lot of times, so you can get a big bite fishing the top water, whether it's a frog around here on the coast, a spook. But I really enjoy and love throwing a buzz bait more than anything, probably.
He's got a toad buzz up there too, guys, from Dirty Jigs. It's up there. That's a really good product. Okay, Bill Lowen, shallow water expert. What he's primarily known for, he's probably the best overall well-known swim jig fisherman in the planet. So Bill, I know there's guys here that are really good with it too, that might address some things, but kind of go over your swim jig thoughts and just give them a basic swim jig kind of primer.
All right, well, I feel like you kind of throw me under the bus here because everybody in Alabama, when they're born with a swim jig in their hand. So, you know, I grew up on the Ohio River, and as far as I'm concerned, the Ohio River is probably one of the toughest places in the country to fish. If you catch 6 or 8 pounds a day there, you typically do really well. When they're really biting in the springtime, 10 or 12 pounds is a really big bag. You know, here that wouldn't even do you any good at all. But what that did for me, and not only with my flipping and my shallow water presentations, but with my swim jig, and look, I'll be honest with you, I learned how to swim jig fish totally by accident. Going down the bank, flipping a jig, I can remember, and this has been 30 years ago, I'd fished, you know, daylight to noon basically, and only had 1 or 2 bites. It was a really bad day, and I can remember pitching that jig in there and being done with my presentation and swimming it back to the boat and having a 2.5 pounder follow my jig back to the boat. And on the Ohio River, a 2.5 pounder is a giant. So I didn't pay no attention to it, and I just went back to flipping my jig, and about an hour later, I wind that jig back in, and I got another, about a 2.5 pounder following my jig back to the boat. Well, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but at that point, I said, hey, maybe I need to throw this jig out there and just wind it back in. I went from getting no bites to getting about 25 bites that day, practicing for an event. The next day, I go and I catch every fish swimming a jig. That was the very first time I ever won swimming a jig. But why I tell that story is just, you know, look, fish don't read the same books that we do. Just because Bassmaster Magazine says that's the way you got to do it. Sometimes that ain't the case. You know, I always tell everybody, take the techniques that we all know, that we all love, and try to fish them in a little different manner than everybody else is doing. And that, I think, is what the Ohio River did for me. It taught me how to take a swim jig and break it down and learn everything there is to learn about a swim jig, on head sizes, to trailers, to colors. And as Dano knows, and all the guys that I talk to know, is I go really in depth on, you know, how many strands of skirt, how many pieces of tinsel, and maybe it's got 4 strands of chartreuse skirt in it, and things like that. But I think swim jig fishing is no different than any other technique. Pay attention to every single bite. The fish will tell you exactly what you need to do every single day if you listen. It's just like putting a puzzle together. You know, and like I said, I pay a lot of detail in the colors. You know, day in and day out for me, if I'm on a really good swim jig bite, I typically got a black and blue, some green pumpkin color, and some shad color, typically a white. You can take those 3 colors anywhere in the country and do very well. As far as trailers go, I category that in 3 trailer styles. One that would be what I call a flapping action, like a pack of crawl or a pack of chunk. Something that has kicky or curly legs, like a kick and bee chunk from NetBait. And then my third choice would be some type of paddle tail, swim bait style trailer. You can take those 3 colors, those 3 trailers, anywhere in the country, any time of the year, and I think you could do well, very well, being a swim jig fisherman.
Thank you, Bill. Wes?
Hold on, mono or braid? That's everybody's question. Or fluoro.
So that's always the big question. Is it mono, braid? Is it fluorocarbon? Whatever that may be. I'm a little different than a lot of these guys. I'm a 30-pound Tactex from Seagar, 30-pound braid. And everybody always looks at me like I got two heads because they're like, why are you using 30? You know, when I got a swim jig tied on 50 or 65-pound braid, I feel like it's on jump rope, right? I've always been the guy that wants to use the lightest line that I can possibly get away with without hurting myself. So by having that on 30-pound braid, I feel like I'm going to get the most action out of that swim jig that I can get. Knock on wood, I've never been broke off on 30 pounds, so hopefully it doesn't happen very soon.
All right, Wes, you're also a swim jig fisherman, but you've won here on this river on square bills, and obviously throughout your career you've done quite a few things. But what's your overall approach to fishing a shallow water fishery like Neely Henry?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the swim jig goes, I mean, obviously that's kind of how I won the tournament here, but it's all situational. That's what shallow water fishing is. It's situational. I just caught them, pretty good at Wheeler last week, getting to fish how I like to fish, and it was more of a flipping, a little bit of frogging, not a whole lot of winding, but you kind of just like, I'll piggyback off what some of these guys, you got to kind of just let the fish tell you what they want. But the basic baits are going to be a flipping jig, a Texas rig, a swim jig, a frog, and a buzz bait. A lot of guys are big on a vibrating jig. It's hard for me to throw it. I'd rather just swim a jig, to be honest. But there is times where they bite it and they will not bite anything else. But colors from a swim jig standpoint, it's hard to argue with Bill. I mean, you need a green pumpkin, a black and blue, and a white. But I will. The one thing that I take away from fishing around here shallow is that's how people fish here. That's how you win tournaments here. So everybody's basically doing the same thing in the same areas. And what this place has taught me, and going back a little bit, I've had some of the best guys, swim jig fishermen, frog fishermen, jig fishermen, teach me like I've been in the boat with them. And I've tried to take everything they've showed me and try and tweak it to figure out a different way to do something than they're doing it. And what fishing here has done, fishing behind people, I've had to teach myself how to get bites behind people, which I think has translated to fishing against the best 100 guys in the world. When there is a shallow water tournament, I have a lot of confidence that I can go behind a lot of these guys. I try not to go behind Bill, Matt, and Scott because we kind of all think the same. But you feel like you have that confidence to go behind people shallow and get a few extra bites. So just having that pressure here, learning how to do different colors, different trailers, different tweaks, stuff like that, has really benefited me out there on the Elite Series.
Now, Mark, you grew up fishing Kentucky Lake, just like John, but you kind of you're probably one of the simplest guys that I know when it comes to how you approach specifically flipping and pitching. You kind of narrow yourself down to two things. Tell them what it is.
Well, I do, and it kind of transponds just from tackle and technique. Obviously flipping close quarters. I've moved to a rage crawl. A rage crawl is a Strike King soft plastic. I put it on a 5/16 ounce tour grade sinker and a 5/0 hook, Gamakatsu hook, and I've gone to using that much more than a jig. It's a little bit different profile. It's a little smaller. It still gets big bites, and you get lots of bites with that soft plastic. But what I've done and what I've learned in hot water situations like we have right now, these guys all know the best stretches on the Coosa River. They know that stretch. They've got a lot of history there. So I have to put myself in a different area. And what I always try to do when I go to a lake in the summertime, and I want to fish shallow, is find some incoming water, some creek that has a natural flow of incoming water. That's got its own select population of fish. Now, is that the tournament winning population of fish? Sometimes it is this time of year, but there's always a few fish up there in that moving water. That water will be a little bit cooler. Those fish will be a little bit more active. And you do run the risk of tearing a lot of good stuff up, and thank God for Tony and Mary, because I've done everything from knock a motor off here at Neely Henry to lower units to trolling motors and whatever. They put me another one on, and they get me out the back door, and I'm back to fishing. So, but that incoming fresh water is what I try to look for this time of year.
Okay, John, you're another Kentucky Lake fisherman. That's where you grew up fishing, and largely you have focused yourself on offshore type stuff, but you have to compete. How do you look at competing shallow?
What I don't do is go behind all these guys because they're way better shallow water fishermen than I am. So when I do fish shallow, I tend not to go to the bank, but I took what I learned as a child and a kid fishing the bank. I take those same aspects, but I push those to fishing shallow offshore. I mean, you still have the shad spawn later in the year offshore. You still have a lot of bluegill. You have shell cracker that spawn offshore. All those same things you get fishing the bank also translate to that same depth zone offshore, whether it's 1 foot to 5 foot deep. And a lot of things, I mean, Scott pointed this out, shade is a huge deal this time of year. You can't visually see the shade offshore. You don't have those overhanging limbs. But what you do have is you have a stump, you have a log, you have a pile of rocks. And what those fish will do is they'll tuck in the shade. So, I mean, a lot of times you have to pay attention to the angle the sun is shining, and they'll tuck behind a piece of cover offshore. So what I've done growing up is that I haven't fished a lot of shallow on the bank stuff, because if I do go shallow, Scott and Matt and Wes are going to clean my clock. They're going to catch every fish before I get up there. But I fish shallow offshore. A lot of the same things. I'll do a vibrating jig, oversized square bill. I cover a lot of ground, but still fish shallow. It's kind of an overlooked depth zone when you go offshore, because a lot of people go to the bank and then they go out deep where they can scan fish. But really that mid-depth zone and shallow offshore produces a lot of bites. And also a lot of time, Mark pointed this out, Mark looks for moving water up shallow. Most of the time, the most moving water in any system, the Coosa River nearby here on Gunnersville and Wheeler, most of that air conditioner moving water is offshore. So you still have the best of both worlds. You still have moving water, and you also still able to fish shallow. So that's kind of how I approach fishing shallow. Yeah.
John Cruz, 2 Elite Series wins. They've both been on shallow tidal waterways with the California Delta and the St. Johns River. What's your approach to shallow water fishing?
So one of the biggest key takeaways that I would talk about is that, you know, these guys are definitely power fishermen. Most people like to power fish, but you can power fish with finesse tactics. And what I mean is, I take one of the things the last, I don't know, 6 or 8 years I've really caught a ton of fish on is a drop shot, but I'm pitching it and flipping it in places that guys are throwing rage craws and jigs and tubes and other baits that are more power techniques. But I'm taking, if you took and what I learned a number of years ago is, if you take that drop shot weight and you lighten it up to like an 1/8 ounce weight, but you can upsize your line to, like, say 10-pound Sunline Sniper. That's usually what I use for a leader on spinner rod. I take a Missile Baits Magic Worm. It's just a 6-inch straight worm. You can take that and pitch it into any, like, skip it. You can skip it up under docks, man. You can take it and pitch it up under overhangs. You can pitch it into laydowns and just work it right through there. Having that thing Texas rigged on there with a little Gamakatsu G-Finesse light wire worm hook. 2/0 is what I've caught a ton of, 4, 5, 6. I've even caught 8-pounders on that same setup. And you can just go right behind other anglers that are fishing power techniques, and you pitch it in there, and you really kind of know where the fish are going to be sitting. So the biggest piece of advice I could tell you is, when you pitch that bait in there and you're like, yep, that's where he should be, don't move it. Just leave it, just leave it, just leave it. And a lot of times, about the time you're like, okay, I'm gonna just reel it in, you'll start reeling it in, and it'll be going down the bank, 15 feet, and then they've already got it and they're swimming off with it. So that would be the biggest thing, is that don't forget about finesse techniques. Fishing like you do power techniques in the same places, into cover, and don't worry about getting the fish out, man. Hooking a 5-6 pounder on 10-pound test up under a dock is not a big deal. Just don't put too much pressure on them and just hold them, and a lot of times they'll come on out. As long as you don't have barnacles or anything like that to deal with, usually you can get them out.
Funny, there's a guy in Clear Lake, California, and everybody's heard of Clear Lake, and the fish that they grow out there are as long and big as my leg. There's a guy named Wayne Brazil out there that wins a bunch of tournaments, or he used to. He's retired now. All on 8-pound line, all on drop shot. And he fishes docks. And so what Wayne would do is, with his spinning rod, he'd pitch in there and he'd get a bite, and the fish would take off to the other side of the dock, open the bail, let the fish swim out into the middle of the lake, bury up in grass, walk the rod through the docks, go over and pick the fish up. He would just let it go. I probably would have terrified me to death, but he's caught 12s and 13s doing it, and I've watched him do it. Just take your time with it. Okay, I know you guys got some questions for this crowd. There's no such thing as a dumb question at all unless I ask it, because then nobody's going to get their questions answered. So somebody give me something that you want to hear. Yes, sir.
So like now in the heat of the summer, most people are either like early morning or I'm a late evening guy. Am I wasting my time sitting on the couch till 5 or 6 o'clock, or should I be hitting the heat of the day?
Okay, his question is this. Most people here probably out of comfort level more than anything, but they're early morning fishermen or late evening fishing. Is he wasting time sitting on the couch and not being out there in the middle of the day?
Yeah, you're wasting time, but you know, fishing's also about being, you know, having a good time and enjoying yourself. And you're probably pretty smart, because right now most of the current flow on the Coosa River is later in the day. You check the generation schedule, most of it's happening after 2 or 3 o'clock. So that little bit of current that they flow in the afternoons kind of picks up the bite in the afternoon. And if you ain't having no fun and you're dying out there in the middle of the sun, you won't stay there long anyway. So I think it's a pretty smart move.
And if you're not in a tournament, you don't have to be out there. You're defeating your purpose if you're not enjoying it, because you're not going to learn anything.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. I mean, if you can stand the heat, maybe stay in the shade or something. But graphing, spending time learning electronics is something you could do during the day on the water that'll help you. You don't have to necessarily kill yourself fishing in the heat, but anytime on the water is good time as long as you can enjoy it.
Well, I got something to add. Well, you know, obviously we don't want to be out there when it's 110 degrees because it's very uncomfortable. But I will add this to that. Being a shallow water angler, basically my whole career, is that in the summertime, I always feel like fish are going to get as shallow as they're going to get all year long. That's being pre-spawn and everything. I think it's got to do with oxygen level. The water's a little cooler up there. It's a cycle of life. When it's really hot out there and you can look under the trees and you can see little brim and little bluegills and things like that swimming around. I think that's a bite that we miss as anglers because, we just have that misconception that every fish in the lake goes deep when it gets hot. Whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, I see them go as shallow as they'll go, where you think their backs are sticking out of the water. And let's face it, who doesn't like catching them when they're that shallow?
I got a question to follow up. Matt, let's talk here. Mark, maybe you can answer some of the other types of lakes, or whoever has it. Coming from the West Coast, when it gets hot, we tend to go really light on weights. But I've heard out here, a lot of times you go the opposite. You go as heavy as you can for fast fall to create a reaction strike when you're flipping or making presentations in shallow water. Is that something that you've done over your career?
It's something I do all the time. My main jig in the summertime is a 5/8 ounce, and I'm wanting a big bulky presentation and I'm wanting a rapid fall. So, I mean, I do that, but the biggest tip I can give you is pay attention to what bites you get. Every bite's a clue in the puzzle. Sometimes they want it ripping by their face at 100 miles an hour, and sometimes they're laying a foot under the water and they won't hit it unless it's in their face. So pay attention to the fall. Every bite I get, I want to know, did he bite it up high or did he bite it on the bottom? If you're fishing in 10 foot of water and the fish is biting it 5 foot down, you want to lighten it up. But if they're biting it on the bottom, why do you want to wait all that time for it to hit the bottom? So, but yeah, as a general rule, the warmer the water is, the heavier I go. But there is a reverse to that too, so you got to pay attention.
Anybody got anything to add there?
Yeah, the reverse of that is what I'm going to talk about. And you've got, what are there, 7 of us up here? You've got 7 students of the game. So whether Little John realizes that I'm watching what he's doing to be successful in, and I've watched Wes do well in tournaments. Bill and I, we've all been friends for a long time. But Bill taught me something a long time ago that he was runner-up in a tournament, and I took that information and I ran with it. He finished second at Old Hickory, as I recall, and he was fishing. It was hot. It was in August. He was fishing about yay deep, but he was fishing a big worm, a 10-inch worm, with a very light sinker in it. So he's starting in shallow water, so he doesn't have a long distance for that worm to hit the bottom, but he was using a light worm in that big bait. One of the things that happens in the summertime, when water temperatures get high, the fish's metabolism gets high too. Metabolism is what tells them it's time to eat. They're hungry. That's what makes them hungry. The higher the water, the faster that metabolism. But when water temperatures get above 85 degrees, fish are just like us. You want to get as close to that buffet as you can, without having to run over there and get it. So we walk over to the buffet that time of year. So they want a big presentation, a big bait, so they don't have to do a lot of work. And that's what that big worm does. I fish that big worm an awful lot, either in shallow, ultra shallow water, like I learned from Bill, or out there off of the structure components out there in the river as well. So big worms, big presentation, big meal, so the fish doesn't have to work so hard.
So you're saying I'm like a hot water fish. My metabolism's always going?
I'm saying that I'm not going to say.
It's okay. I'm the one that put the cheeseburgers in my throat. What about you two down there? You got anything to add to that? Hot water presentations, something that makes a big difference for you?
I think they've nailed it all down. And circling back to fishing in the afternoon, Mark nailed it on the head. You know, the hotter it is, the higher the fish metabolism is. And when you go out in the afternoon, that's their primary feed time. So when you're going out those last few hours of the afternoon, you're hitting the best time of the day, in my opinion. Because if you go out, there is an early morning bite, but those fish also feed all night. But they really pick up their afternoon feed at 3 o'clock till dark. So by going out late in the afternoon, you're hitting it at the prime time. And if you're able to, it's hard not to go where fish live and when you go out fun fishing. But if you could go out and fish different parts of the lake, different depths, different bodies of water in the afternoon, you could really learn a lot by where fish live and where they feed at and where they sit through the day by just kind of going in that prime time when their metabolism is high, like Mark said.
I'm going to go a little bit in a different direction, but kind of talk about what we're asked. And the biggest piece of advice, a lot of times, is people fish the same body of water over and over again, and so it's kind of hard to improve when you keep fishing the same places. So the biggest thing I would say is that when you go out, especially if it's not in a tournament situation or a pressure situation, is to try to fish like a third or half of the day into totally new water. It might be a point that you fished 100 different times, but maybe the next time you go to the left and you just go on up 200 or 300 yards, you keep fishing, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that there was a little gravel pile up here about 200 yards up from where the actual tip of the point that I always fish. It's 200 yards up there, but man, there was a whole school of spider bass on it. I could catch every one as many times as I wanted, but nobody fishes it because it's kind of like one of those in-between places, and maybe you'd never have fished it unless you actually fish it and not graph it. So, those kind of things is when I fish like Smith Mountain Lake at home, I got fun fishing. I mean, at least half of the day I'm going to fish new water. And a lot of times people say, well, you catch, well, I don't know. I didn't catch too much today, but I was out there hunting and looking for new stuff. Because to me, that's exciting, that's fun. And if you're not doing that on the same bodies of water that you fish over and over again, you're just going to keep catching whatever you've caught for the last 15 years. You're going to catch that same thing, if not less. So the only way to get better is just to keep looking for new water and build on the kind of the inventory of good places that you have.
Wes, I'm going to turn this one to you right here. I got a question. Unless anybody else got any questions? Okay, go ahead, Jen.
Everybody's talking about worms, and I'm just wondering on your preference on the back end. Cut worm, speed worm, root tail, Senko, is there a reason why which tail is better this time of year?
She's talking about with worms, is there a type of worm that makes the biggest difference for the time of the year? John, I'm going to let you start with this one because you manufacture them. So the thoughts on missile baits and kind of how the worm tails and what you expect.
Yeah, you hit the three major categories, I call it. It's a straight worm, which has kind of no action. It's just the undulation of the worm that is the action. And then you have the big ribbon tails, which are one type of action. And then you have the cut tail kind of worms like a speed worm or something like that. There's definitely times when each one will shine. And if you find a school of fish, like a giant school of fish like John did over here last week at Wheeler, you might be throwing each one, because you might have a school of 50 fish that you're fishing for. You might fish a straight tail worm, catch 3 or 4 fish, then you rotate to a ribbon tail worm, catch 3 or 4 more fish, and then they'll stop biting. And then maybe you throw a speed worm or something like that in there and you catch 2 or 3 more. So there's not like there's not a set in stone kind of situation. It's like if you have a group of 50 fish, I think there's a percentage that'll bite one, there's another percentage that'll bite another, and then there's a percentage that'll bite any damn thing you throw in there. Then there's a percentage that ain't biting any damn thing that you throw in there. So that's just kind of the way I look at it.
All right, Wes, I'm going to put this on you to start this. Everybody has one thing that kind of defines how they go about a fishing day? What's that one thing for you professionally that makes the biggest difference for you on the water?
Like as far as a successful day on the water, or just a day on the water?
Just you as a fisherman, what's the thing that you try to focus on when you're trying to put as many fish in the boat as you can, and then we'll go down the panel?
Yeah, I mean, I try to take every opportunity I can when I get to go out there to learn something that I didn't know when I went out there. Because the cool thing about this game that we play, I mean, it's our livelihood, but it is a game we go out there and play for I mean, us as an entertainment deal for y'all to watch. But it's always changing. It's never the same. Like every day is different. It don't matter. The weather can be exactly the same. The water conditions can be exactly the same. But we're still dealing with a creature that's got a brain about the size of a dime. So, I mean, we give them a lot of credit because, I mean, we can't catch them, but they still have a mind of their own. We don't really know, like, there's no set thing, like you go out here, you do this, you catch them. It's always changing, so I try to go out there and find something that I didn't know. And, like, I can just see, I'm young, but I can take things that I might have seen when I was 15 or 16 and, like, just be fishing out there one day and be like, man, I remember they were biting like this one day. And do that for a second, and everything just starts clicking. In a tournament situation, you can put stuff together a lot faster, but even when you're going out there just fun fishing, trying to enjoy yourself, you can learn something for the next time you go out there to maybe when you take your buddy, y'all can have a better enjoyable day or anything like that.
I'm going to tell one on myself that I need to work on myself, which is to concentrate. Wes and I did a Bucks Island Live yesterday, and we caught them pretty good. It was fun. 2 hours, we caught them, but we showed there's some geese that showed up on the bank, and Wes goes, I tell you I hate geese. And I said, what's wrong with Canada geese? They're good hunting. He goes, they're worthless, I don't like them. I said, well, they do leave a lot of poop. And then I tell him a story. I said, you know, my dad and mom live in a mobile home park, and there's a ton of Canada geese there. My dad wanted to buy a bicycle. My mom said, there's too much duck and goose poop around here, you might slip on it and crash, and I don't want that to happen, so no, you can't have a bite. And I'm telling him that story, and then two of them come down to the water's edge and start thrashing, and I'm watching them. He goes, set the hook! And it was the biggest fish we caught yesterday. For me, I got to work on concentrating. It was kind of a funny story, but for me, that's my thing, is concentrate. Matt, what is the biggest thing for you?
For me, I just like to go out and enjoy every day. I'm always, I'm a professional tournament fisherman, so it's hard for me really to go out anymore without thinking about tournament situations. And every day that's how I challenge myself. Every day you go out and you're like, well, they ain't biting nothing, I'll go back to the house and eat a sandwich. You can't do that. So it's all about getting in the mindset. My dad made a comment when I was a kid, and it really kind of set my professional career going forward. Is Dad was, he done it for enjoyment. We always fished together. We'd go on Saturday or Sunday. He goes, boy, let's go home. We cut the grass, do something else. They ain't biting. Something clicked in my mind, and I got furious. And I'm like, I don't ever want to hear that again. They're biting somewhere, somehow. And I refuse to accept they're not biting. And
he's from local around here, and he's, near and dear to a bunch of people's hearts around here. He's the face of Gadsden, fishing on the Coosa River and stuff. But he took me under his wing when I was about 18, right as soon as I graduated high school, and we started. He was traveling fishing the Costa Series at the time for FLW when it was still FLW, and he let me travel with him as an 18-year-old and showed me the ropes. And because it's a whole different world than fishing at home than going on the road, like being away from everybody that you're in a random hotel room, like it's just a whole different deal. And he took the time to take me and teach me and show me how to fish different lakes and how to break stuff down. So I know he's not doing real well right now, and I'd like for everybody to pray for him, but he really did teach me a lot, and I truly probably would not be sitting here with this jersey on if it wasn't for him.
Little John, I know you're sitting next to someone who's had a big impact on you, so he don't count. Who else has been your biggest inspiration?
I'm not going to swell Mark's head up any bigger than it is. His Yamaha hat may pop off, but I learned a lot from Mark, and not only stuff on the water, but a lot about how to treat this as a business and how to go about things. I've watched every single one of these guys besides Wes. He's my age. I've watched every single one of these guys. I'm not that old, but as I was growing up on TV, really wanting to be in their shoes, and it's really a privilege to be here sitting next to John and Matt and Scott and Bill. Really enjoy being here, and I've learned so much from all of them, whether they know it or not. Me just sitting back and observing. So I'm not going to point out one person, but it's just the entire Elite Series class, veterans as a whole, because what they have done and all they have accomplished and what they have taught me, I couldn't replace any of that.
Bill, who was your biggest inspiration?
You know, my biggest inspiration is probably going to be two people. You know, obviously it was my father, because he was a tournament fisherman. I was growing up at an early age, so I got the taste and the love for tournament fishing from him young as a kid. But then as that progressed, he kind of give it up and I kind of took over. But as early as I can remember standing on the banks of the Ohio River saying that I wanted to be like Denny Brower someday. So Denny Brower was my guy. You know, he was the shallow water flipping guy, and all I can remember as a kid is wanting to have a flipping stick and jerking 4-pounders out of brush piles. And I was very blessed that, I guess it was about 4 or 5 years before Denny retired, that him and I were practice partners. You know, we'd share info at the Elite Series tournaments and things like that. So it was cool to have a childhood hero that you got to basically bounce ideas off of on the Elite Series. And, you know, like I said, that was, 4 or 5 years before he retired. So those would be my two inspiration, or people that I kind of looked up to and will always be thankful for. And as far as, what gives me hope is, and I'm going to use John sitting down there, I always say you lead by example, and he's doing a great job of what he's doing and being a leader for his rookie class. Mark brought up the deal about John having too many fish in his live well at that open on the Arkansas River, and I can remember sending John a text that said, "Hey bud, keep your head up, been there, done that, know exactly what it feels like." And here we are, what is that, 3 years ago that he did that. He's on the Elites now, leading by example, just won his first Elite Series tournament, and I think his rookie class, if they can look up to kind of what John's doing, I think a lot of them will have a bright future.
I'm going to add a Denny story to you. Denny as a competitor, he had a mean streak. He's a hard competitor, and he came to the 2010 Bassmaster Classic and blanked both days. And Louis Stout is someone that works in my profession. That Louis Stout is a guy for me that's an inspiration like they have with people, and I'm fortunate to call him a friend. And Louis walked up to him and said, "Dude, you just blanked 2 days in the Bassmaster Classic." He goes, "I know, it sucks." He goes, "But I'm not fishing here to finish second, so I went after what I thought was going to do to win." And he goes, "All I know is I've been thinking about retiring, and if that MC says something smart to me, I can think of no better way to retire than to drop him on stage." Scott, you go ahead and tell them who your inspiration was and then what you think of the future, and then Matt, you take it over.
Yeah, growing up, my family got me into fishing, but I'm sort of like Bill. I was a shallow water fisherman, we river fished worms and stuff, but I'd always wanted to fish the jig, and I looked up to Denny Brower, one of them for sure. And I got good friends. I became good friends with Jay Ellis, and when I went pro, I got to room with him. He was just a great mentor to me. Means a lot, but that was sort of the same story that he had with Denny. Denny was one that made me want to flip a jig. I remember him winning tournaments at Eufaula, flipping pads and flipping just a little brush and everything, and it just made me want to fish a jig. And my parents or my uncle, nobody ever fished a jig. We were worm fishermen. So I looked up to that, and I had to take that and learn on my own. And then, I had Jay as a mentor, which was one big inspiration, but somebody that I've got to spend a lot of time with. I traveled all over the country with him and looking up to. He never has a bad day, is Clay Dyer, he would love to be here with us too. He's one that I look up to a lot. And then all of these young kids, the college anglers. I've worked with the high school anglers in Moody, and these guys. I try to tell these young kids, the high school kids and the college, mainly the high school kids, because if they're going to fish in college, they're going to know it by then. But this is a tough sport. It's not just going out fair weather fishing. You got to be prepared to fish no matter what the weather is. And these guys nowadays, the younger kids, are doing it. It can be 30 degrees and raining, and we used to do it when I was a kid, and there wasn't that many kids that did it back then. But the sport's really grown. So all of the younger kids, the generation that's here now, we got the best group of rookies on the elites that we've ever had as far as winning tournaments, dominating these tournaments, and a lot of it's technology, a lot of it's not. A lot of it, they put their time in. I mean, they work hard. All these guys I know put lots and lots of hours on motors these last few years, and there's avenues that are different now. I mean, stuff is more available now at a younger age than it was when we was there too. I mean, high school fishing is a big thing now that never even thought about, 30, well, I'm old now, 35 years ago or so, but, these younger kids are when they get 18, 19-year-old, they're able to take that step and compete, and they're showing that they're able to do it just like John is.
I'm sold. I know I've about changed all y'all's diapers, I think.
I fished again. You and your dad.
I can remember rescuing this.
Yeah.
What was it, Clark?
Yeah.
I don't even know how long ago it was. We was fishing the Anglers Tours Team Championship or something. I was with my dad. And him and Clark Smith was 80 miles up the river at Old Hickory where they should have never been, lost as a goat and broke down. I'm the only fool up there, but no, I mean, I watched them all grow up, and it's kind of funny because they've got all their heroes, and literally when I was coming along, you got to remember it was 1981 I graduated high school, and I watched Stanley Mitchell. Yeah, at that time he was the youngest class winner, may still be, but he that kind of set the fire in me, and then. I'll be all right, yeah. Just a lot of memories.
I know how to make you mad.
Yeah, maybe mad. But literally all my heroes go up and down this river. That's it. Ain't gonna name no names. That's it.
I love that guy. I love that guy. All right, any questions, technique, anything that you guys got? Or do we just want to get to the raffle? Oh, you got a question there, Mason. What's going on? Here.
I got a question for you, Garrett. John Garrett.
Let's hear it.
So, with a college championship and a Elite Series win in your rookie season, what were some things that kind of helped you work through college, work through the Opens, and eventually the Elites?
I would say, I mean, definitely having the right people around you, being able to learn and be on the water a lot. I was very fortunate. I had a really good granddad. I still do. And we spent countless hours on the water. Not everybody has that great resource, but I had a really good granddad. We spent a ton of time on the water before I got to college. And when I got to college, fortunately, I was close to the lake. And me being there, I had a really good group of friends that we learned a ton off of. And did not go to class as much as I should have. I spent too much time on the water, not in the classroom. Therefore, it took me 5 years to graduate instead of 4. So I spent 5 years of my life literally basically bass fishing. And I was going out traveling the country on that fishing scholarship. And I mean, between my granddad really raising me up correctly, teaching me as much as he could, and basically him being my resource for everything I do on the water, and with the college fishing, that's just, I would say that those two things just kind of piled up, and was a really good stepping stone to get into the Bassmaster Opens. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up with this. John Cruz, one technique for the rest of your life, that's all you can do, what it's going to be. And we're going to go down the line.
One technique I would have to say for fishing and having fun is just top water. I would throw a top water probably every day, and I'd go out there in the wintertime and I'd probably just throw it anticipating one to bite, and then if one didn't bite it, I would just be dreaming about a bite I had the last fall. So if there's one bait I don't know what kind of top water, I probably don't even care what kind of top water, walking bait, popper, frog, but those explosive top water bites, man, they get me going.
Well, I can't top a topwater bite. But if I had to pick one thing, I'd probably just pick a red worm. I know we've talked about worms a lot here, but a red worm's going to get bit all through the year. Fish it shallow, deep, however you want to. I'm not going to pick a swim jig up and try to go behind all them guys because I wouldn't be able to catch one. So yeah, red worm is mine.
Well, again, I'm not as old as Matt. 1982 was high school for me. But it would have to be a spinnerbait. I love a spinnerbait bite year round. It catches big fish. Caught my biggest fish I ever caught. Well, the two biggest fish I ever caught, I came on one. But I really enjoy trying to figure out new ways to present a spinnerbait, whether that's fishing on a ledge out in 15 to 25 feet of water, fishing it on the bottom, burning it back to the bait, whatever it is. How many times have you had that fish come in a spinnerbait and it's like everything is in slow motion, and then he gets that big bait and he turns? Spinnerbait for me.
Yeah, mine's definitely going to be swimming a jig. I mean, kind of just hand in hand. I made too much money on it, and it's like a bad drug for me. Like, I have a good buddy in practice. He'll be like, "You swimming that jig?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "How many bites you had?" I said, "One about 3 hours ago." He said, "You're ruined." Because I'll do it for 3 days of practice just thinking that I'm going to run into it. But when I can make it happen, normally good things happen, but it does. It can be a kiss of death, but I do love it. I love the bite. I love everything about it.
All right, for me, if I had one technique, it's going to be an old school technique. It would definitely be, it would involve a flipping rod, a 7'6" Art Invoker flipping rod, and a 4-inch green pumpkin tube. A tube for me is a bait that a lot of guys don't throw anymore. It is a bait that'll catch big fish and a lot of numbers. It's a bait that'll catch smallmouth, largemouth, and spotted bass, and it'll catch them from Texas to New York. So if I had one bait, one technique for me for the rest of my career, it'd be a big flipping rod and a 4-inch green pumpkin tube.
If I only had one to choose, which I'm a shallow water guy, flipper, I mean, I can throw a shaky head or whatever, but I like catching fish. I'd get a lot better at it too if I did it more often, but I would throw a jerk bait. Everybody thought it was just a wintertime bait, but man, they catch them on it year round. Everywhere we go, somebody